What is up, YouTube? Today I'm coming back at you with another video, and today's video is going to be a review of a tabletop RPG. Before I get started, if my hair looks weird, I just got out of the shower, that's why it looks that way. But today's review is going to be a review of a game. And today's game that we're reviewing is Basic Fantasy RPG. It's a tabletop role-playing game. And if you've never played one of those, think about D&D, and it's basically a game sort of like D&D. The reason why I'm doing a review of this game is because a lot of the reviews I've seen online, there's only a handful of them, are sort of from a similar perspective. There are a lot of older guys that grew up with like very early versions of D&D, or people that have played a lot of the early D&D, or just a fan of that style game. And so I just wanted to give a different perspective and a different type of review than what other people have given so far. And so so we're going to be reviewing this. This is the paperback version, and so you can get this on Amazon or Lulu, or you can get the nice thing about this game is if you want to play an RPG on a budget, a tabletop RPG, this is the best option in my opinion, because you can get every single thing that for this game is free in PDF form on their website. It even tells you on the back that everything is free online, and you just go to their website and download it. So that's one really nice thing. So before we get into the actual review of the game itself, let me just give you a little bit of a background of my experience with tabletop games and what I prefer and whatnot. So a lot of people that I've seen that have done reviews for this game so far have been people that have played D&D First Edition or Basic and stuff like that, or Second Edition, and really like those older style games and want to go back and play those types of games. Me, on the other hand, obviously I'm a lot younger than some of the people that are playing. I'm not saying that their viewpoints because of that are invalid or anything, it's just a different view. My first version of any sort of tabletop RPG that I've ever played was Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. And after 3.5 stopped being a thing and 4 came out, I moved on to Pathfinder. And Pathfinder has been my go-to game for the rest of my time playing tabletop RPGs. So I'm very familiar with Pathfinder. As you can see, it's a very thick book, and I'll just get into that later. I'll kind of sort of compare this to Basic Fantasy and what are the differences, because they're sort of based on the similar thing. They're both based on 3.5 OGL, which you can kind of tell in Basic Fantasy, but it's based on the same thing, but they're very, very different. So let's just get into it. So I'm not going to spend too much time about going every single little detail. There's other reviews that do that, but I'm just going to give you a basic overview of what sort of things you can expect in Basic Fantasy. So in Basic Fantasy there are 4 different races. You have your humans, elves, halflings, and dwarves. You have your 4 basic classes, excuse me. It's fighter, magic user, thief, and cleric. And there's no subclasses, no archetypes, or anything like that. So it's all very, very straightforward, and everything is very laid out, and it's because it's so simple, it's very well balanced in my opinion. So that's something that I really like about this game. It basically covers everything you need. Everything is in here. Basically, you have everything from character customization. You have dungeon master things. You have siege engines. You have your equipment. You even have a small bestiary in there as well, so you can get some monsters. It's got a pretty decent size. There's, I would say, on average 2 to 3 monsters per page, and it goes on for about I would say about a fourth of this book, or maybe even a third of this book, is the bestiary. You have all your spells are in here. Basically everything is self-contained within this one book. Now that is coming from something like this. In Pathfinder, this does not contain any monsters at all. This is the core rulebook. It has no monsters in it. So it's already, I would say, 2 to 3 times thicker than Basic Fantasy. It's got a smaller font too. And there's no monsters in this. So this is all core mechanics and rules. There's just a ton of rules in this game. And it's got a bunch of different classes and a bunch of different races. A lot of calculations and a lot of math go into this game. And as you can see, I bookmarked it, so because everything's scattered through here. So like, there's also special abilities like feats and stuff. So let me talk about a little bit why I bought this game. So unlike some of the other reviews that I've watched, I don't have a whole lot of what they call OSR games, which is like old school Renaissance, which basically means it harkens back to the original D&D, where things were a little bit more simplified, the rules were a lot lighter, a lot more was up to GM interpretation. I don't have a whole lot of games like that. And I don't really plan to buy a whole lot of games. I basically only wanted one old school style RPG, and I ended up picking this just for a few different reasons. One reason is this uses the OGL, the 3.5 OGL. And what I like about that is, since I'm very familiar with Pathfinder, it was a very easy transition to get into basic fantasy because a lot of things did transition over, or a lot of things were very similar but just slightly different. It has your ascending armor class, just like in Pathfinder, so that's something I really liked because I understand the descending armor class. I know I would have trouble calculating it on the fly, and it would just take me a little bit longer to do things. With the ascending armor class, it's very simple for me. Really clicked really instantaneously, so it was a very easy transition. One reason why I really wanted to pick up basic fantasy is that it is a much more lethal game. Unlike Pathfinder, when you hit 0 hit points in this game, you're dead. Your character's dead. There's optional rules for other ways to keep your character alive if the GM so chooses, but the rules as written are you hit 0 hit points, your character's dead. In Pathfinder, you have an unconscious thing where I think it's like 5 or 6 rounds after you hit 0, you start going into negatives, and you can go negative up to your Constitution modifier plus like 5 or something, and then you're dead. So you do have quite a long time before you actually die in Pathfinder, and I know it doesn't sound like a lot when you hit 0 points, so you're laying unconscious on the ground, you're like, oh my god, you only have so many rounds. But literally, out of all the sessions I've played in Pathfinder, I've gone unconscious maybe twice, and in those amount of times, maybe 1 or 2 rounds it took me to get revived with a health potion or lay on hands or something like that. Some sort of way. It is very easy to not die in Pathfinder. Another thing about basic fantasy that I really like is it's a low fantasy setting, whereas Pathfinder's high fantasy. The differences between those two are your character at level 1 in Pathfinder, he's already a step above, a good step above, like a normal person. So he already has special abilities that he can do, or like cool feats, and like he's got crazy spells already at level 1. The spells in Pathfinder are super powerful and early on, and they just get even more ridiculous as you go on. And by the time you level up to level 20, you are, not even level 20, by like level 7, our character's already verging on invincible if you play your characters right, which is just outrageous. It's fun, but it's just a completely different type of fun, and it's a different take on fantasy. Basic fantasy takes it in the direction of, it's very low fantasy. So your character starts off, for instance, a wizard starts with 1d4 hit points. That's it. One solid hit from pretty much the weakest creature in this game can kill you as a wizard. So you really have to play a little bit more strategically. The spells are very scaled back. They're not uber powerful like they are in Pathfinder. It's a very different take. And so that's one thing I really liked. I like that old school feel there, where your characters aren't invincible from level 1. So, see, this review is off the top of my head. So if there's various different pauses, that is why. But all the mechanics that you need are here, and they give you a good framework to work with. And anything that's not in here, it gives you sort of some little helpful things in there to help you roll as a GM for rules that don't exist, such as it's got ability charts for, there's no skills in this game, so it gives you a framework to roll ability scores. It gives you obviously thieves have abilities that roll on percentile die, and so those are specifically set in there, but everything else is pretty much up into interpretation. One thing I really like about this is when you're trying to discover things, such as secret doors and stuff, instead of rolling a d20, you roll a d6. And for some reason, I feel like that it works out a lot better, and it makes the flow of the game a little bit faster. And overall, the flow of basic fantasy is much faster than Pathfinder. And to give you an example, in Pathfinder, as you level up as a fighter, you'll start to get bonuses for feats that give you extra modifiers on your damage. You'll get your strength bonus, you'll get your weapon bonuses, any other magic spells, and all of that just adds on top. Whereas in this game, the majority of your modifiers as a fighter come from magic weapons alone. And that means that there's a lot less math going on. To give you an example, I've run this game as a GM, and I'm going to run this as a player later tonight, actually. And to give you an example, in my Pathfinder campaign, by level 7, we had a paladin, and when he was rolling his attack rolls, he had 5 or 6 different damage modifiers on top of his weapon that was a masterwork weapon. So you had a bunch of different things you had to account for, and then you had your critical rolls that did extra damage. There's no critical damage in this game, so all of that on top of each other really made combat get bogged down, take a little while. While fun for some people, and I personally found Pathfinder's combat very fun and very rewarding, it is slow. It's undeniably slow. Pathfinder combat, on average for us, took 25 to 30 minutes per combat encounter, and that's just normal combat. Especially in higher levels, it just gets longer. Early on, it's pretty much the same, but later on, it's like 25-30 minutes on average for Pathfinder combat. This game, much simpler combat, a lot less rules, a lot less modifiers. It really makes things a lot easier, a lot more open to role playing. I really like a lot of the charts that they have in here for different things, like the Wandering Monster, your treasure type charts. This is very, very helpful for creating dungeons. These are all different, like ways to roll for treasure and how to reward players for treasure and stuff. It's very, very nice and straightforward. All of the everything that's in here, you pretty much have everything you need. You have rules for wrestling, you have rules for normal men, you have rules for grenade-like missiles, cover, missiles that miss, monster attack bonuses, melee combat in general. And one thing I really like about this game is your attack bonus goes up by a set increment, and so you have this nifty chart here for all the attack bonuses for monsters and every single class and every single race and stuff. It's all right here, and that's all you need for your attack bonuses. So it makes things very easy. You don't have to wonder what your attack bonus is. You don't have to go flipping through multiple books, looking at your class, trying to figure out exactly where you're going up and stuff like that. It's all there. And that's the whole reason why I wanted this game. It's a much more simplified version of 3.5. It mixes mechanics from the early D&D, basic and expert editions, and it mixes it with 3.5. And I find that mixing brings it up you get that old school feel with a lot more modern style mechanics that kind of blend very well, in my opinion. And I think it works very well. And some of the things I really like about this game are just like overall mechanics, the limited number of classes, the limited number of races. It makes things much more balanced that way. It comes with a small bestiary in here, and it comes with ways to set up your own adventure and stuff like that. So the book is very self-contained, and also you can get something like the field guide, and this is just their bestiary that they have, and all this is just monsters and monsters and monsters and stuff like that. Pathfinder has similar stuff. They have a bestiary. They have multiple bestiaries, actually. And Basic Fantasy is coming out with another bestiary. It's Field Guide 2. So yeah. So one of the reasons I keep talking about the simplification of there's not a lot of races, there's not a lot of classes, is for new players. Personally, that's my favorite thing about Pathfinder, is the plethora of options in terms of classes and races and subtypes and archetypes and slight race variations such as draconic heritage and just all that makes a very engrossing character building experience, and that's like 90% of the fun in Pathfinder is building such a great character and then using that character. But for a new player, that makes things very, very difficult. And to show you why, I will show you two examples. So first I'll show you my character sheet for my magic user in Basic Fantasy. This is the character sheet, and that's it. There's no back. That's it. That's the whole thing. It's got all my spells. It's got all my equipment. It's got all my characteristics, all my my modifiers. It's got my saving throws, my gold, my weapons. Everything's on here. And that's it. That's all you need to know. And so it makes it a very, very simple experience to roll up a character. And it makes it very quick. I think a character probably would take 15 to 20 minutes max making one for Basic Fantasy, which is fantastic. Pathfinder character sheets. This is the Pathfinder character sheet. And now, while it looks like, oh, it's basically the same size, this is actually a packet. You have your character skills and modifiers and feats. Second page, you have your base attack bonuses, your combat maneuvers, your health, your armor class, your saves. Third page, you have your inventory, your armor, your shield, your money, stuff like that. After that, since I was a wizard, I had a whole list for my prepared spells, how many spells I can learn per day, which is also nice in Basic Fantasy because that's set in stone. There's not a whole lot that can really vary in terms of spells learned, whereas in Pathfinder can vary greatly, so you have to get this little spell chart here for what kind of spells you can and cannot learn, your bounded objects, your schools of specialization. Another thing for writing spells, I never really used that. I started to, but I never really used it. And then just like other various things like party information and all that stuff. So there's a lot going on in the character sheet for Pathfinder. And that makes it very intimidating for new characters, especially if you're playing a magic user. This is not all I carried. This packet, and I didn't even go through the whole packet. This packet wasn't the only thing I had to carry as a magic user in Pathfinder. I had to print out, these are all my 0 level spells, all the cantrips. I had printed out all those. I printed out some starting spells. These were the spells I started with at level 1. And these are just some spells, and eventually I got so tired with printing out, like making spell cards and stuff, that I ended up just printing off from the PFSRD, and eventually I got even tired of that, and I just asked the GM, I'm just going to use my phone, and I'm just going to look up my spells, because it's too hard carrying around all these packets of paper. And so that's what I ended up doing. And so that made it a very complicated experience as a Magic player to play Pathfinder, whereas Basic Fantasy makes things a lot simpler as a Magic user, a lot less spells, and stuff like that. So far I've pretty much been singing praises over Basic Fantasy and the things I like, and this video is pretty long, so I'm sorry about that. But I want to go into the things I don't like now. So, things I don't like about Basic Fantasy. There's not a whole lot, really. Some of the rules can be a little bit clearer. It's not 100% perfect, and some of it's just maybe due to myself. Such as, I got confused. A very simple, easy mistake to make, and I'm sure other beginners might make this mistake. It's easily clarified, but in the hit dice section for your class, for level 1 it says 1d8. Now if you're rolling a character that is a certain level, yeah, it's pretty easy to understand. You just roll whatever that number says. But if you're coming from the perspective of leveling up, I got a little confused. So it says 1d8 for level 1, and then it says 2d8 for level 2. So I thought every level you get an extra die to roll with, whereas in actuality you just add an extra die on to your current die. So for instance, in level 2, instead of rolling 2d8 for a fighter, you would have your original 1d8 that you rolled at level 1, and then on top of that you would add your additional d8. I think that could be a little bit more clear, and I think they could lay it out I recommend laying it out the same way it does in Pathfinder, where instead of having that hit dice chart the way it is, I would recommend just saying what the hit die is, and then adding for levels 10 on the additional modifiers that automatically come. So for the hit dice section, just add 0s up to level 9, and then 10 onwards, just add your plus modifier that automatically comes on for your hit dice. Whereas, just add like 1d8 straight down, because for leveling up I think it'd be a little simpler, but I mean that's all personal preference really. It might be more simple to somebody else, but that's just one thing that I thought was a little weird. One thing that was not something that I really disliked, but it was a little bit to get used to, is rolling for initiative every single turn. So the turn order changes per turn, which is a little different than Pathfinder, where you roll one time. I like and dislike this at the same time. It kind of takes combat a step down in terms of speed, because you're constantly rolling for initiative. Whereas in Pathfinder you roll initiative once, but to its credit, it's still faster than Pathfinder, even though it has that. I do like rolling the d6 for initiative. That's pretty neat, so then two characters can go pretty much at the exact same time. Yeah, so one thing that I'm going to address that is my major concern with this game, it's just a concern, it's not something that's really negative. On the downloads page for Basic Fantasy, there are what they call play-tested supplements that are approved by Chris Gonnerman to be compatible with this game and work really well with this game. Amongst those are combat options, thief options, magic user options. Now I know in the past, I've seen posts in the past, and I've seen some things on the forums in the past that have said that he doesn't plan on releasing any more rules or like any more additional classes in print form, and I understand that. But I looked through the magic user options, the combat options and stuff like that, and they all say that they're optional, but I really stress that I really don't want those in printed form. Even though they're great supplements, and I think they work very well, I really don't want those in a printed form. I'd really rather prefer those staying as a digital download only. And the reason for that is, as running this game, with a lot of new players, since I play with a lot of new players, since I'm like a newer generation, I would say, a lot of younger people, the mindset from most of my players is, if it's printed form, then they want to play with it. So printing those optional rules like that would kind of give validation to the fact where those are rules as written, we should play with those rules. As a GM, and if they're only PDF, that gives me the option to say, hey, I printed off these rules, I want to play with these rules, instead of them, the players, trying to force rules that they want into the game. It's just something that it's a personal preference. It might not be it for everyone, and I had sort of a concern with the same thing with the equipment Emporium, but I looked through those rules, and those rules really aren't game-changing. All they do is add extra ideas for like equipment, so like a slightly extended handle on a sword that gives you an extra bonus. That's nothing different than a magic item, really. So my main concern is the fact that those combat options, those magic user options, are on the front download page, and things in that page have moved from the supplemental section to the section that's going to be printed before. I just really stress that I really rather not have those be in a printed form, even though they're great supplements. I'd really rather not have them in a printed form. And that's just might be a personal preference. You are more than welcome to disagree with me, and you're more than welcome to just like agree with me or whatever. And maybe he's changing his mind. He's more than welcome to. It's his game. The reason I say that is because if you start doing things like that, it's a very slippery slope, and then eventually you'll just be like, well, why not release extra classes? Why not release extra mechanics and stuff like that? And the reason why I don't want that, and my big reason why, is if you started doing that, Basic Fantasy would no longer really be basic. It'd be Advanced Fantasy for real. And it would basically become Pathfinder Light. And there's no way you can compete with Pathfinder in terms of customization. Pathfinder has so much customization in it, has hundreds of books, it would take a lot to even start to compete with Pathfinder in terms of customization. And Pathfinder already fills that niche perfectly, so there's no reason to go that way. I think it does what it does very well in Basic Fantasy, and I don't think it needs to have those combat options in a printed form, and I don't really want those in a printed form. However, what I really think that they should focus on in terms of printed materials, the Equipment Emporium is fantastic. Maybe more equipment. I'm not even sure how much more equipment you can add with the Equipment Emporium being as great as it is. More field guides, those are great. You cannot have enough monsters. And I would really recommend, I looked through your adventure settings, and I really think that the best thing that I would recommend is make a campaign setting, not an adventure with dungeons, but I think it would really flesh out something where you could make a campaign setting book, where you give the outlines of a campaign and just have them like that. Nothing that changes the mechanics, just like a campaign setting and maybe like a few adventures in that campaign setting. So you could just give like a framework for somebody who's a new GM. I think that'd be a great addition. So that's basically my overview of Basic Fantasy, what I like and dislike. I actually like this game so much, I ordered, not only do I have the paperback versions of the field guide and core book, but I ordered the hardback versions because I wanted to support the game and I really want to make sure that this game lasts for me. I do intend on picking up the hardback copies of the field guide too, and the Equipment Emporium when they end up coming out. So they're fantastic books. You can get this core rulebook, which is all you need to play, for $5 on Amazon. There's no reason not to play this game for that cheap. But yeah, that's basically everything I have for you guys. Those are just my thoughts and overviews. I know it was kind of convoluted. I know my string of thought was a little all over the place. So I'm sorry for all of that. But if you did make it through the video and you did get through my opinions on the game, let me know what you guys think in the comment box below. I respond to all of my comments. And I just wanted to give my a little bit different take on Basic Fantasy. I know a lot of the stuff was the same from what you've heard in other reviews. It's a very great and very well polished game. But I wanted to give you the perspective of somebody who plays a lot of Pathfinder as well, and what I think about it. So that's all I really have for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I do plan on doing more videos about tabletop RPGs. I did order some more tabletop RPGs. I don't plan on picking up any more OSR type games unless they have vastly different mechanics. Like a little spoiler alert for a video that I plan on doing. I did pick up RuneQuest Classic, and the reason why is, unlike a lot of the OSRs that are based on D20 systems, RuneQuest is based on a D100 system, which I find very fascinating, and it's different. So I wanted to pick that game up, and I wanted to pick up systems that are very different in terms of style and different mechanics than anything you've ever seen. So I don't plan to pick up any more OSR type games. Basic Fantasy is going to be my game for old school type games. And for anything modern, I'm probably going to play 5e, even though I don't really like 5e, or Pathfinder. Pathfinder is probably going to be the game that I'm going to play most for modern stuff. That's all I really have for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, like I said, I answer all of them. Leave them in the comment box below. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys next time.